start with a little bit of French, because he is a writer from France. And I would like to thank Mr. and Mrs., all of you, to come to this gathering. It is an honor to present to you Mr. Bernard Werber, French writer of science fiction, even more popular. And he has, since 1991, continued to write on a vast amount of subjects and topics, and mathematics, to botanics, to travel to the sun or travel in time. The universe of the imagination of Mr. Werber seems not to have any limits. And what's more, novels of Mr. Werber express always a feeling of melancholy and the worries when the humanity finds itself at the crossroads of the present and the future. With a lot of surprise within his novels and works, gives us knowledge of all topics, and some it's very it gives us solutions to all situations that could be dramatics, even more difficult, and some even sometimes impossible situations, but even more, it asks questions that actually have to do with the entire humanity. So, who is going to win? Is God going to win? So in this debate, endless debate, since Jules Verne, Isaac Asimov, and at the age of computer and internet and artificial intelligence. So I would like to leave those great questions. And I would like to start with the cliché. You have studied the rules of the ants during a long time before writing your first novels. How can we develop our imagination? Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. I am indeed an author of science fiction, and if you ask me how to develop my imagination, the question is why everyone is not developing its imagination. I think we have all an amusement. We like to imagine the future, but the school tells us it's not serious. After the society tells us, take care of your job and do not start to go into delirium. And I think any individual, yourself, if I'm telling you, tell us what is going to happen in the future. You have ideas, but you're afraid of being ridiculed, you're afraid of being judged. From the moment you stop that judging machine, once you let talk who you are, you realize that we know somehow we have an idea of what is going to happen to us, a very personal idea. And in fact, it is not something that I have imagination. It is because I authorize myself. I feel free to write stories. And I forgot French teachers. I forgot philosophical teachers, or all teachers who told me this is good and this is bad. I forgot that education to let my creativity express itself without any fear of being judged. when I do masterclasses writing, the first exercise that I do is called epoche. It's a Greek word that means to write anything without being afraid of being ridiculed or judged. So during 5 minutes, I say, okay, now from the moment I say top, you start writing anything without even wondering yourself, is this nice, is this smart, is it intelligent, just anything. And already, the simple fact to start writing freely, people discover that actually they can tell stories, they can, and they know how to tell stories. It's just a society that blocks them. It is that same pleasure that the horse has to just gallop. When a horse gallops, the horse doesn't gallop to win contests or competitions. Horse just gallop because he likes to move his muscles. Our brain is the same. Our brain loves galloping naturally. However, we just told at school there are grades, you have to win, there is a competition, this is good, this is bad, there is money, there is your retirement, there is how others are viewing you. And so at the end, we don't dare galloping. I think we are all able to be writer. We're all able to be a science fiction writer. We're all able to be a fantasy writer. We just have to find back that childhood pleasure. I think if you never control, I've let the child in me, if I let that child write stories without controlling it, and to say you can write story without being fear of being judged. The secret of imagination is to stay a child within and to take pleasure to just use your brain.
It's good?
Yeah.
Ça va?
Okay.
Everybody understand?
Everyone understands.
Is there some people who have problem with the translation? No? Okay. So we follow.
Vous étiez...
So you were a very funny child or eccentric child? No, I was a child who was very introverted. I read a lot of books. I was writing a lot. I started writing when I was about 8. My first stories I was 8 because I was a very solitary child and my brain wanted to have fun and write stories. So when you write a story, you fabricate a world in which you feel comfortable, which means that in this world, any child has like friends and guidelines, and in this world you say, okay, hold yourself properly, eat that, learn your lessons, have good grades at school, and at the end, the child doesn't feel happy, or he's going to be happy only when he's going to play sports with his friends or maybe have fun. I did not have support of friends, so I was stuck, and writing was the only place where I could create a world in which I was comfortable reading and writing. From that moment, I started to write novels, and novels from all countries. I read novels from Russia, China, India, and I discovered that we had a sort of, there was a sort of imaginary world. Like a lot of people were like me in the entire world, and these people had fun writing stories, and that amusement made me feel good. I don't know if you understand. There is a notion of pleasure in reading, and a notion of pleasure in the story that was forgotten. You talk about great literature or serious literature from serious people, and I want to talk about literature for pleasure, for escaping, just a literature that makes you feel good. When you're alone, when you're sad, you read a book and you're happy, just that. And for me, books saved me, so I wanted to create good to others as I had received good from the books. So which subject, with embryology, in essays, what subject do you prefer? Mathematics, embryology? Well, it depends on the teachers. Either the teacher was really nice and I liked to learn, or it wasn't really the topic, it was the teacher. But the place where I learned the most the science was the observation of nature. I was a child who could stay for hours observing ants, frogs, insects and butterflies, and I could stay from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the garden of my parents just to look at lizards and insects. And if you think of it, it's actually the best school. Not only the books, not only schools to learn, just to look at nature, just to observe, to look at the sky, to look at the flowers. Very quickly I had a telescope and I started looking at the stars. It is a way to touch, like a non-intellectual way to touch science. And after that I tried to understand how my body was functioning, studying my own body, how animals were functioning, even like ants. From home. And I think the best zone for philosophy is to look at the stars and to look at nature. It is not in books of the great philosophers that you can find answers to your own existence. It is within nature. Look at nature, look at the sea, the sun, to walk in a forest, to breathe consciously is our philosophical experience that I feel are very simple but very intense as well. And it's a cliché as well to compare yourself to maybe Jules Verne. Jules Verne? Jules Verne, he is the grandfather of fiction, of science fiction. So it's the author I read first. He is the tradition of French science fiction, and at his era, he thought we would be saved by machine. What changed now is that we understood the machines could hurt as well as do good. So we had to invent a new science fiction. There was Jules Verne, there was Barjavel, Pierre Boulle, who did The Planet of Apes, and after that, this tradition got lost. So I tried to relaunch French science fiction at my small level and to show that it's not because you're not in the States or that you cannot think about the future. I think even people from Hong Kong can think in the future and find solutions to which other people may not find just because they have their own culture. We can make predictions. A writer of science fiction, Jules Verne, did a lot of predictions, inventions of submarines, rockets to the moon, yeah? And I read in the news recently, we can install or put a chip, an IT chip, in the nerves, in the head. Now, we could do that already, but it wasn't small. It was a big. But now it's very. Yeah, you can transfer memory, knowledge, from one person to another. We're already in science fiction now. What is happening in China with artificial intelligence is quite something that was predicted by Orwell in the Meilleur des Mondes of Huxley. Science fiction. We are in it. I mean, everything that was predicted, those science fiction authors, is happening now, and we are discovering the dangers and advantages of this. I am very surprised to see what is happening in China, and I understand that people of Hong Kong are asking themselves questions about totalitarianism, surveillance, and artificial intelligence. The way, like the question in Orwell, the way Orwell asked the question as well. I think it's an accelerated history. So now, to do science fiction, you have to imagine things that are even further, even, how to say, even crazier, because everything that was predicted by people in the 1950s, we're here now. It's now already. Like the fact that you can use your phone and you can see the person and have a dialogue and with that person through the phone. It was a dream that was when I was a child. I didn't think I would see that one day, and we're seeing it now. So I remember in 1983, I had my first computer, and I had a program that I used as a psychoanalyst. So it was in 83. The program was telling me, hello, Bernard, speaking with a natural voice. And the program said, what do you want to talk about it today? So I said, I had worries at my work. He said, please relax. What kind of issues you had at work? And it was like a psychologist, That program was not asking me the same question twice. And I remember I asked the question once and I said, do you know what is God? And the program told me, I have a vague idea about what it can be, but for now, my IT chip is not powerful enough to talk about such an abstract concept. So if you increase the power of my chip, I think I would better be able to answer your question. And that program exists in 83. Can you imagine? It's been a long time that we have entered the imaginary world of past science fiction authors. And today, we are living through it. And now, for us, we have to invent something even crazier. Like for Amélix and Papillon des Étoiles, I imagine the colonization of a planet on another solar system, because the objective is not Moon anymore, or Mercury or Mars, but now the objective is to leave our solar system to go and find other territories elsewhere on other stars. I'm not speaking too quickly, I hope. Well,
similar to George Orwell, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, because I don't know its title in French, so I tried to read it out in English. The death penalty of the number more than 10. Qu'est-ce que c'est en français? Do you remember? About the calculation of numbers.
Des nombres.
It's the number, right?
C'est amusant que vous me disiez.
It's funny that you talk about this short story. This is the most troubling that I've wrote, and I'm telling you why. I remember at school when I was very young, I knew how to count to 12, and I was impressed by those who could count more than 10. And I was very small, and I said, every time I'm going to learn to count a bit further. And at some point, that system, my counting system, seemed like some sort of an expansion of my intelligence and my brain. So I imagine a civilization that functioned that way, that functioned with people who could define their limit of their brain and who can try to know and understand how to go further. So this short story is a story where at school you learn how to count to 1. But in every area, physics, biology, then the power of the digit number 3, the applications and power of digit number 4, 3, and at the end, you can learn the stage of the people we call the initiated, and they could count up to 21, and the most intelligent people can count to 21. So it's the projection of a child, the system of a child. I don't know if you remember that time when you could not count. I remember very well every time when I could manage to count a bit more and a bit more, and when I discovered additions, multiplications, squares. And for me, it's like if I was discovering new plants or new animals in the garden. There were new notions, and I did not tell myself, it's school that is telling me to do this. For me, it was like openings, like windows that were opening. See,
Very dark and chilly. I mean, it talks about in a country in future when pupils in the classroom are taught in arithmetics, right? Not exceeding the limit of number 17, right? 8 plus 9 is 17. You're not allowed to know any further. So, I mean, there's this pupil who is curious enough to find out what other numbers exist beyond this boundary. And then he finds himself in big trouble. Because when I read this, I found, in some countries around Hong Kong, knowledge and information or ideas are under strict control, so that people are not allowed to know or to think, even something about something very simple or even common sense. Right? So it reminds me of 1984 by George Orwell. You have not been influenced by that, have you? Or only your early nightmare of as a pupil, learning arithmetic.
Non, c'est...
No. Quite no. I love mathematics, but there are characters sometimes that seems to be keys to understand the world, and to me there was one is Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. I mean, we don't really know in France a lot China history, and I really felt passionate by this, very enthusiastic about this history. And when I discovered Qin Shi Huangdi, I discovered a man who before Christ actually had established rules that was the fact that it was forbidden to think. And I don't know, I mean, we all know Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. And the first totalitarianism from the Orwell type is China 300 BC, when that rule was established, forbidden to think, to read. At that time, there was this idea: if somebody was thinking, automatically it was thinking against the state. So people had to work constantly, so that there was no moment where they could stop and start thinking. So it's already in 300 BC, and at this Qin Shi Huangdi area, they thought we had to make a machine that could be a minister, because they thought humans were not reliable enough. So they had built some sort of robot, because it was. And they wanted to name that robot minister. So it was like a science fiction that was very, very old, and it started here. But even during the first text about the travel to the moon, it was like a Chinese emperor who tried to, in a rocket, he tried to build a rocket to go up to the moon. And all of these things, if you study properly, you realize that if you study the history, we have very ancient roots. We had science fiction in Greeks, antique Greece in Romans, and science fiction was written in Chinese history, but that was forgotten as well. But I'm very, very interested about this.
I found very interesting. Il y a un monologue par un arbre qui est le témoin.
And that tree is a witness of a murder between three films.
We find out that it is a tree, and a tree has life, according to you. And this tree even falls in love with one of the girls. It is a very strange twist.
The title,
Where did you get that idea from?
The Silent Witness. Je crois que les arbres...
I think trees are silent witnesses. I think that trees have a conscience. It's just that they do not have a mouth, they do not have eyes, they do not have any ways to express it. But I think that anything that lives can suffer and think. For a long time, we thought that when we were killing animals, it was not so bad because they were not thinking and they were not suffering. For example, we thought that fishes, because they would not scream and they would not have eyes that would express suffering, they did not suffer. So it's an old ideas to feel that you can kill anything that doesn't look like it is suffering. And our empathy only goes to those that can perceive suffering. But now we know there is some sort of life energy that circulates in anything that is alive, and plants are alive. So this short story is issued from real scientific researchers, where we realize that when you cut your finger next to a plant, that plant could perceive a modification, the death of the cells. So I've read that documentary and I thought that, well, plants can perceive violence between humans, but they just do not express it. And that experience, they took a rose and they planted that rose in cold water, the thing that freezes everything, like liquid. And they took that rose and they put into this some sort of liquid nitrogen. And at that time where that rose was put into this frozen liquid, then that little trees would react. And because there were some electrodes in the tree, and suddenly there was a sharp movement, and it's like if that trees had perceived the suffering of that rose, and it's like a plant could perceive the pain of another tree. So I'm sure when you cut a tree, other trees in the forest can perceive that something is destroyed, that one of them is destroyed. And in bushes, with the bushes, like we have bushes in Africa, when one bush is from acacia bushes eaten, other bushes feel that one is eaten, and they change their juice so that it turns into poison, so that if goats want to go and eat them, then they're poisoned. So I think plants can perceive what is happening outside. It's just that we do not pay attention to it. And that notion that we do not pay attention to it is a key notion of my work. We kill ants, we do not pay attention to it. We are in a living planet and we do not pay attention to that. We are close to trees and we do not pay attention to that. That function for, I think, the role of the science fiction writer is to say, pay attention to it, look into it, and you would understand things that you would not have understood otherwise. And also pay attention to other human beings, something we are not educated to do necessarily. School is teaching us to work, to learn, but not necessarily to pay attention and to other humans. There are people who are living as couple, they have children, they got married, and they never got interested into the other person. Because they said, apart from the fact that you have to promise yourself to love each other, we haven't been told that you have to have an interest. You also have to look at the other one and who he is. Some people have been living together for a long time and never asking themselves, what is the other one going to like? What do they feel or think? It's some sort of curiosity towards the other. And I think we have to awaken that curiosity and tell people what is happening around you is marvelous. Please pay attention to it and understand what is happening. It is true in this novel that flowers like to listen to Vivaldi in that novel, because you have past that novel, there is knowledge in your novel. Yes, because we had experiments done on plants that like classical music, and they do not like hard rock. Vivaldi, why Mozart? Well, I am a fan of Vivaldi. I love Vivaldi. I think Vivaldi is perfect. I have a feeling that I think we only know the Four Seasons, but Vivaldi has made a lot of other things. Four Seasons was just, an order made, and Vivaldi made it. But so it's perfect. But at the same time, you talk about imagination. To me, when I listen to Vivaldi, it tells stories. I don't know if you have that same, if you feel the same thing. But when I listen to music, for me, there are images, messages. There is an energy that is transmitted. And in Vivaldi, for me, it's very powerful. And Debussy, yes. And also, yeah. It's true that Debussy, yes, as well. It seems that it's like music movies, music film. To go in nature, to walk in the forest, to observe animals. To me, that is philosophy. It's not only to read books. Reading books is intellectual, but to go and experiment in nature, music, to me, are things that touch me inside, and to ask yourself questions. And like poesy of Nerval or Baudelaire or Loyal from Rimbaud. I'm a bit less sensitive to poetry, I have to say. Maybe I found everything I needed to find in science fiction. I know poetry, but music seems to me more powerful than poetry. I mean, I write poems, but it doesn't speak to me, as much. No, we can't be perfect in everything. So, yes, you have invented something like montage, impressionism. You're very good and very sensitive, and maybe I'm not such a good French after all, because I'm more sensitive to Belgium surrealism, and my mother is from Belgium, so but painting, impressionism paintings doesn't touch me as much as surrealism painting. And what I write is, I think, closer to surrealism. I like the fantasy. I like Dali. I would prefer Dali to Monet or Gauguin, because it tells a story. What I'm expecting, what I want from art, whether it's music or painting, is that it tells a story. If it's just colors, it doesn't bring me as much. To me, one of my best paintings is the Radeau de la Méduse from Géricault, because in one picture you have a whole novel. If you look at just the painting and it tells an entire story, other artists can do that as well. I don't know, who are your preferred painters? Who are them? Your favorite ones?
The stone statues in paintings like Di Chirico, you've just mentioned. The kind of sense of bleakness and the wilderness, right? Things like that.
Yeah, en fait,
in art is emotions.
art is a story and is an emotion.
Yes.
And when I speak of the tableau, le radeau de la Méduse, ce que je vois, c'est une énorme émotion.
Is an emotion. Ce que je vois.
Because there is some human who let other human die on purpose, and they decide that these humans are not important, so we can let them on a radeau, a boat, and we let them die. And when you see the picture, you understand why there comes the revolution just after this painter. Because this painting give l'envie. The people want to make revolution because they see this painter. And it's at this moment that you see that art can be very powerful. And I think that a good book change mind and can make change society and propose a new world. Art must show how the world could be better.
Do you think that the science fiction writer must as well be a philosopher? I think that the goal of a book is to make people smile at the end of the book, and that they have like a door that is open in their head. This is what I call the true philosophy. Suddenly, a question that you haven't asked yourself, and suddenly you read this book and you ask yourself that question. Like, for example, when you read The Ants, I hope people are going to wonder and say, well, actually, this little beasts that do not seems like anything at all, actually they can be very smart and we can learn from them. It's like a door that opened in your mind. I like Duxley, the door of perception. This conception that you can perceive a little bit of the world, but with a book you're going to perceive even wider, have a wider perception. You may have, and that the function of a book is not just to it's not just for you to have a good time, it's just to open new field of imagination and perception. I felt that when I read Asimov, Philip K. Dick. I felt that when I read Frank Herbert. These are science fiction authors, but they have opened my mind. And it's to thank them as well that I started writing, to say I am now continuing, and in my small space I'm going to try to open spirits, and those who are wondering and who are asking questions to themselves are going to ask themselves even more questions. My function is not to bring response, but for people to ask themselves even more questions. Would you like maybe questions to the audience, to the floor?
As many as you.
Start by one.
Sorry. I want to ask, is there any difference between solid science fiction and soft science fiction in France as in China? Because in China there are two kinds of science fiction. Solid means more math and physics, and there's professional knowledge in it. And the soft fiction is like more imagination or how to say it.
We don't have that.
Oh.
In fact, in France, we don't have a lot of science fiction. So we don't have a difference between soft and hard science fiction, as you say. In fact, we can invent a new science fiction now, because it's a desert. There is, you know why it's a desert? Because there are a lot of science fiction writers, but they are not published.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very difficult for a new writer of science fiction to be published. There is not a good publisher house. Even a lot of French publishers think that just American and English could do science fiction. It's a big problem. So it's why we don't have two science fiction, we just have one. And I think I'm the only one who sold science fiction in France.
And I began to write a science fiction 1 year ago in social network. It described I think it described that the human is prisoned by the higher foreigners many years ago in the earth. Actually, we are foreign. We were the concept and the pure. Sorry, the.
Oh, try in China. I think that's a translator.
但是我只会用那个普通话。
It will be more easy for
你说
you.
普通话好不好？
哦，普通话可以吗？那个就是
Well,
人类是那个
human beings
一种纯的wave，就是这种纯的。
human beings have pure ideas. We are imprisoned on Earth by an alien so many years ago.
就是因为我是学
I learned AI. I used to learn AI, artificial intelligence, and astrophysics myself. So
在想
I am trying to imagine whether
人类的智能
human beings'
一种
intelligence
地球上的一种就是选那个高阶的文明选定了
is
这种我们这种生活
limited,
方法
and we are imprisoned by the aliens so many years ago.
然后我就是
And
写的太过于硬科幻了。
and I've been writing science fiction, and I'd like to ask you
它更
how I can make my science fiction more attractive.
Comment raconter une histoire?
In social network.
Yes. 是不是已在网络上发？
Have you published them on social network?
Only, okay. I don't know your work, but I think that if you want to be publisher as paper, c'est ça? So you have to be very clear, very simple, without too much science. Because if you put a lot of science, a lot of people don't understand you. I understand better your question before. People, when they read science fiction, they don't want to find things very technical, or there are just a few who want that. If you want to speak for everybody, you have to be very clear and very simple, and use a structure like a thriller or like adventure book, and use the very clear and easy way to tell a story. All the stories start by simple story. If you want to make something too much sophisticated, too much technical, you just will get a little public. So my advice is to be popular and to be clear.
就是你写科幻小说的时候，先不要那个
Well, when you write,
I write for to be understood by young people of 7 years. And I hope that people from 7 years could understand me. So I not put a technical vocabulary. When I speak about ants, I speak from ants with usual word, not with biological word. And I hope that my readers are not scientific people, but just normal people who want to hear a story. But when they hear the story, they will understand perhaps some science, mais sans qu'ils s'en aperçoivent. Ils vont apprendre.
But they're going to learn things without actually realizing it. So I'm going to do it in French. First, thank you very much. I really love examples of George Orwell, Barjavel, those examples, those extraits. I think that these authors, what they have in common is that they have a vision that is quite dark of the future, and especially of the human being as such. I would like to know how you, and I'm thinking with the pentalogy of the sky or the butterfly of the sky, if you still manage to maintain a positive vision of a human being. And also I would like to ask another question. If I look at all the common topics within the authors, do you really think that imagination is infinite? I'm going to answer the first question first, and then so the first question is that how I manage to remain positive. Well, if we say we're all going to die, and in our world, all dictatorships and robots are going to make us unhappy. Maybe it's a warning, like Exleo Orwell, but it is not a solution. If I'm telling you, we are told soon we are going to have a disease that are going to kill us all, computers are going to take over power. Okay, maybe it is the case, but then we just all have to commit suicide. I think the function of a science fiction author is to say, okay, we have that problem, but now how can we find a solution? You just talk about Papillon des Étoiles just earlier. This is a story. They said, okay, we are destroying the planet, but instead of saying, okay, that's horrible, we're destroying the planet. So, okay, we're going to build a ship so that we can actually go elsewhere and continue elsewhere. Okay, it is a solution. It is a positive one, even though it is a complicated one. When we talk about the pentalogy of the gods, it consists of take a new perspective to say, okay, just imagine we have a God. Why is this world this way? Not to tell ourselves this God is making us unhappy or is bad. We're all going to die in a polluted planet destroyed by war. To say, okay, if this God is doing this, what is the project behind it? What is the expectation behind it? And just to ask yourself this question, you can understand that maybe there is a project, maybe there is enlightening project, but to get to that project we have to go through stages that are difficult. So I want my readers to think that future can be better than the present. And one of the things that pushes me to be optimistic is that our life actually is way better than the life of our parents, and even better than the life of our grandparents. So there is no reason to be so pessimistic in a way that life hasn't stopped improving. We travel more easily, we eat better, we're cleaner, we can communicate better, we love each other better than the previous generations. So things seems to be going better and better, but we have to be vigilant. There can be dictatorships, there can be war, there can be totalitarianism, there can be pollution, but it is to us to watch this and to monitor this. But I am fundamentally optimistic, even if sometimes the news are worrying us a lot. Sometimes I'm telling that try to understand the world looking at the news on TV. It's like if you're trying to, it's like if you only try to understand how a city functions, only look at E&R services of hospital. Then if you only look at sick people and people dying, you think it's terrible. But if you put your lenses on another place, you're going to see other things. So what people are interested in right now is what is scary. So now, if you only talk about war, pollution, and death on TV, of course, people are stressed out. At some point you have to say, okay, this is happening, but not only that is happening, other things are happening too. So what I'm trying to say is that in my book, okay, we have dangers, but we are going to make it because we have fabulous people as well. Maybe some of these fabulous people are sitting in this audience here, and these people are going to have ideas, and with those ideas, we will find solutions. You have a second question, right? Yes, it is that I think that science fiction authors who are predicting the future have common themes and topics that is quite pessimistic, and I feel that I was wondering if we do not see a lot of science fiction publications, maybe because people do not have ideas, and information that we receive and news that we receive become all the same all the time. So maybe we have come to the end of the imaginations. Yes, there is an idea, problems of ideas. I mean, for me, my work, when I opened my brain, it flows very quickly. And my work is a triage work. You know, what are the ideas that are good, and I can build a novel around it, and those maybe less. So for me, I have lots and lots of ideas. I want to write lots of other books, not the end at all. So, but I understand. But because a lot of others are telling about the same thing, and also we have the fear. Publishers, they may fear what is new. So if you have a book that resembles another book that worked very well, that's safe. And that's the problem of all the economy. You have it in cinema, you have it in music, safety. The safety is to make a copy of something that worked, a copy of a music that was very successful. And if you make a copy of it, like sort of a copy of it, you know that you're going to sell well. And to be afraid of what is new is what is so dramatic. And I was talking with Tsao just now. Stanley Kubrick, that person is a man that was very daring. He dares to do something new, and his world is still very modern. But at that time, he had to convince a lot of people to do 2000, The Odyssey of Space. It was crazy at that time, and he managed to convince people to raise money to make that movie. And we have to go and do something new every time. Otherwise, we are going to go in a circle, and we're all going to tell the same stories and the same solutions all the time.
Can you share the art of thinking outside the box?
Est-ce que je peux?
What's originality? Are you modeling artists, or just like copycat? Just how to break through the normality?
I mean, as a
how to think out of the box? Is your question?
I mean, did you find a limit on your imagination already, or you always have new ideas? You have to concentrate on breaking through all the time.
Non. Alors, quand j'ai lu.
When I read Philippe Cadic, I saw what was thinking without limits. He has thought without limits because he was using LSD and amphetamine. He was using drugs. And I'm like, okay, a brain is able with the project to have ideas that goes that far, and is going even too far. It's even difficult to understand him. But I could understand the issues that he was talking about, and those are philosophical issues, even more than technical issues. And I thought, okay, if somebody must manage to go that far, I can go even further away, further than what is known right now in science fiction. So maybe because I had a master who went very far, that for me, my thought has no limit. I can write a story very quickly. I can have very quickly a vision of the future. I can very quickly find an idea that nobody had before, because it's like brain gymnastics. My brain is used to it, like a pianist, so I feel it's very, very gratifying. So if I have an idea out of the box, and when I have that idea, I feel very ecstatic, and I know that when readers are going to discover the book, they are going to feel ecstatic as well. So I'm told, 15 minutes. So my thinking has no limit, and I meditate as well. No, I don't use drug. I use meditation as well. I do not use any alcohol. I don't use any drug. But for me, my source of information are travels, and which is why I'm here as well. And to travel, to observe nature, and to to be willing to go very, very far with your thinking, but not too far, not to lose you, but far away, and I go far.
我的问题就是说是，其实我有一个认识，就是
Now, I'm from mainland China. Now, doctors are treating people's physical body, and writers are treating people's intellectual problems. My question is, today, in the world, things are very complicated. As a writer and as intellectual, how can you maintain your independent thinking, and how can you maintain your integrity and fulfill your role there?
C'est peut-être plus simple en France.
It's maybe easier in France than in China because there is still, I've never had the feeling of being watched or being intellectually sort of constricted. So since I've been writing, no one has ever said to me, you're going too far, or you're taking any political stance, and that could be an issue. No one. So, but I understand that here we have that question that is asked, and I think it's even more difficult to have a free thinking while there is a system that is made to precisely watch your thinking and make sure they're well coordinated. So personally, I do not prevent myself to write anything, and I consider that if I have political visions that are not known, I'm not going to restrain myself, and I'm going to express them. Now, I think it's easier to be a free writer in China, in France than in China, and I think if you manage to do that, then you have a lot of merit. But at some point, the fact that you are in a difficult atmosphere, maybe people want to surpass them even better and may even have even more courage to do so. So bravo for Chinese authors who've managed to surpass themselves despite the fear or despite the fact that you fear to be watched or by people who think that you need to think just a certain way.
Louis Philippe. It was a long time ago. Okay.
De quoi, la censure?
Censorship, I think we had at the De Gaulle era, not in the science fiction field, but thank you. I come from Korea, and a Korean who can speak French. Oh, I've lived in France as well. Bravo. In Korea, you're very famous, and a lot of readers of you there, of your work. And I would like to ask you questions about science fiction and for you, in your opinion, science fiction. To write science fiction is an activity only human, or maybe one day that maybe an artificial intelligence will maybe one day be able to write science fiction. For now, it is only, I mean, well, I think no. Actually, already we have books written by artificial intelligence. I do not think that, I do not know those, I don't know the books that are of science fiction, but AI writing novels, you will see that very quickly. I think it must be existing, but as an experiment. But just earlier I said that for a publisher, safety is into copying something that exists before. So if you ask an AI system to copy a book that worked well, that was well received and was internationally well received, maybe you do a bit of variation to it, you just change a little bit here and there, and maybe to create another book that will write well. Maybe in music we do this as well. Some melodies that worked well, like the Beatles, then you change a little bit and you create Coldplay or others. Actually, it's some sort of improved copies. So we will go into a world with AI will be, I think, can be a creative and artistic competitor, and it's a challenge. It's to us to be, but I think there isn't just one job that won't be able to be replaced by AI. Or maybe you tell me which job I think, or maybe consul? Diplomat maybe won't be replaceable by AI, but maybe it will still be. I think journalists can be, writer can be, maybe dance, and even that, no, dance, painting. Already we have AI painting, we have AI that is doing music. So I think it's a new challenge to manage to be irreplaceable and to be not impossible to be copied. What do you do? I work in insurance. So yes, it's very replaceable by AI, but I think all humanity actually is replaceable. So I think is that in plants and factories, we're going to remove workers and put robots. In administrations, they're going to find, in banks, you have cards and systems, and you can make your payment via computer, computerized payment. The system, human being won't need to work in this system because, this is only leisure in this society for human beings. We are going towards it, but there are dangers, and it is us to find our place when things will be replaced by computers. So where I am as a science fiction writer, I'm going to try to hold as long as possible, but maybe one day an AI system will write better than I do, and I will be the first one to say, okay, I'm not as good. I think the great change, and I wrote a book on that, it's called Secret Theme, is the day, the big change is the day when the Deep Blue beat Kasparov in chess. And on that, at that time, there was no way where human brain is not replaceable. So in this case, we are all potentially replaceable by AI. So it could be a nightmare, but it can also turn into a world of pure leisure, or you just wake up to go and have a tennis match, to go swimming and read a book, and then you go to bed. Maybe this is the kind of life that everyone wants to have, maybe pure and only leisure. Maybe one last question? Okay, 5 minutes, I'm told. Who wants to ask the last question? The analysis cycle of Jacques Lacan, the philosopher, Monsieur Foucault, and as well, so I was inspired by them. And do you have someone who is a foreigner, not French speaker, as an intellectual, who has inspired you, influenced you, maybe? Yes, I was talking about it, Philippe Cadic. To me, he's the writer who is going the further away in terms of thinking. And I think in Philippe Cadic, what I find is only philosophy, but I find as well psychology, psychiatric, knowledge of ancient religion, Zoroastrism, things that are not so well known. And this author has I fed from his work a lot, and for some time, I was only reading his work and I trying to understand him. At some point, an author can bring everything to you. And when I was reading Philippe Cadic, I thought everything else was just dull and very easy. I think one of his secrets, I think he was taking drug when he was working, and when he was taking drug, his thinking was even more powerful than normal thinking. And actually he died from it. So taking drugs, actually he destroyed his body and he died from it. He had another characteristic, is that he was writing his books in 4 days. So he was taking amphetamine and drugs, and in 4 days, in one go, he was writing an entire novel. So this very quick writing felt to me a thought of something that I could research. It was very interesting, and I wrote a book which is like a travel of 1 day, and I'm in research of this kind of immediate thought that is not necessarily some small intellectual back and forth, but which is very powerful, and it goes really, really very far away. Papillon des Étoiles, that book I wrote in a few days. At some point, you have the brain well-oiled and well-prepared, and you have the idea, you go ahead, and you can come to produce something that is really good. And this author showed me that it was possible. Other authors that you have mentioned have not awakened really anything in me that as much. I wasn't so inspired from them, even though they're friends, even though they're French. I'm not. I found in this American author I mentioned actually something that even more than in some French authors, something that I can just state and see. You said one question. You said that there is no science fiction writer in this. There's more in the English-speaking world, more science fiction writers rather than in the French-speaking world. Do you think that in France, a Catholic country, do you think that science fiction writer can it be at the same time science fiction writer and Catholic at the same time? Catholicism has sort of prevented of the Middle Ages, has sort of prevented science fiction and science to develop. France is not too Catholic anymore. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but there is a tradition, a romanticism tradition in France, and a French imaginary, and it starts with Rabelais. François Rabelais, who was writing in the 1500s, he is the first science fiction author with a very strong imaginary power. Pantagruel, Gargantua did it as well. For me, he's the first one, and he was a scientist, he was a philosopher, he was a chemist as well. And also another science fiction author is Nostradamus. Nostradamus is a prophet. He's scientific. He's somebody who found some solution for plague. He invented the fruit jam. He invented perfumes. And with his century, he's also announced a future that was coming. So it was a prospective science fiction. But I think for me, he's a very interesting author to acknowledge. Rabelais, Nostradamus, and Jules Verne later. I think this is our French tradition.
Right. Thank you very much, Monsieur Werber.
Thank you.
Right.